Happy Passover, everybody. We've been having the kids over, and it's been festival season and a lot of celebrations, a lot of time in the synagogue, and it's been hard to fit videos in. I'm trying to do my best here to get some good content for you. I'm obviously not in a normal studio right now. Now, with this video, I want to do something a little bit different than usual. I'm going to read in full Prime Minister Netanyahu's pre-Passover address, the official English transcript that was released by the Prime Minister's office. And the reason I'm going to do it is that I believe that this was a very important speech. Now, under normal circumstances, what I would do with an important speech, as I do with so many of the videos on this channel, is I would play the full clip. It was about 11 minutes long, and then I would comment. But because it was given in Hebrew, and in the past, in some of my recent videos where I played a Hebrew language clip with subtitles, I saw in the comments that a number of you said that you would prefer it if I just said it in English because you're listening to the YouTube video. You're not necessarily watching it. You might be doing something else while you're listening to this, and you'd rather I say it than listen to it in Hebrew. So I am actually going to read you this entire speech. Now, again, the reason I'm doing this is I think it was a very important speech. I think it was one of the most important speeches of Prime Minister Netanyahu's long and storied career, because it wasn't just a war update. It wasn't just a political speech. It was in many ways a victory speech. And there were a number of key moments in it, messages that he was giving, which are not, it's not just that I'm saying, wow, this was a wonderful speech. It also signaled in certain significant ways what might be happening in the days and weeks to come. Prime Minister Netanyahu was crafting messaging in a very particular way for the Israeli people. It was also a great speech. So that's what I want to do. I know it's a little bit unusual, a little different than what I usually do, but let's go through the speech together, and then I have a fair amount to say about it. Okay, so here it is. Here is the speech. My brothers and sisters, citizens of Israel, on the eve of this festival of freedom, Israel is stronger than ever. The entire world hears our lion's roar in our struggle against the evil regime in Iran, a struggle in which we have achieved enormous accomplishments. But at the same time, there are painful costs. Only yesterday, we lost 4 of our best sons. On behalf of the citizens of Israel and on behalf of myself and my wife, Sarah, I send our deepest condolences to the families of the fallen. We all embrace with love the families who lost what is most precious to them, and we all embrace with love our heroic wounded in body and soul. For we are one people, bound by the cords of a common destiny to ensure our existence and our future. Marking 1 month of our joint campaign with the U.S., we are systematically crushing the terrorist regime that for decades cried, "Death to America, death to Israel." It is true. In every generation, they rise up to destroy us. That's a quote from the Passover Seder text, the Haggadah, that in every generation, they rise up to destroy us. And in this generation, the regime of the Ayatollahs made a massive effort to annihilate us, to take over the Middle East, and to threaten the entire world. It tried to promote these murderous ambitions through the development of nuclear programs and ballistic missiles, the funding and arming of terror proxies around us, and by weathering the heavy sanctions imposed upon it. Now, I want to tell you, over the years, all of this has cost Iran nearly $1 trillion. And now it can be said, that trillion has gone down the drain. But the price we exacted from Iran did not end with money alone. In the spirit of the upcoming Passover holiday, since the beginning of the War of Redemption, that's Netanyahu's name for the war since October 7th, the whole war of redemption, we have dealt 10 plagues upon the axis of evil. The blow to Hamas in Gaza, the blow to Hezbollah in Lebanon, the blow to Assad in Syria, the blow to terrorist organizations in Judea and Samaria, the blow to the Houthis in Yemen, and 5 more blows to Iran, the blow to their nuclear program, the blow to their missiles, the blow to the regime's infrastructure, the blow to the forces of oppression, and the plague of the firstborn, right? That's the 10th plague in Egypt, the plague of the firstborn, or in our case, the blow to the senior leadership, From the tyrant Khamenei to the nuclear scientists and on to the master murderers of the Revolutionary Guard and the Basij, not to mention Nasrallah, Haniya, Def, Sinwar, and many, many more. After the 10 plagues of Egypt, I remind you that Pharaoh still tried to harm the people of Israel. And we all know how that ended. So it is in the campaign against the Iranian axis of evil. The campaign is not yet over, but even now it can be said that against the 10 plagues suffered by our enemies, we have achieved 10 great accomplishments in operations Rising Lion and Roaring Lion, and in the War of Redemption as a whole. Rising Lion is the 12-day war in June. Roaring Lion is this war. And War of Redemption, as I said, is the whole war since October 7th. Now he goes through the 10 accomplishments. 1, we created a strategic reversal. Before these 2 operations, Iran sought to suffocate us. Today we are suffocating them. The Ayatollah regime in Iran is weaker than ever, and the state of Israel is stronger than ever. 2, we awakened the world to the danger Iran poses to all of humanity. Before the operations, most of the world did not heed our warnings. I want to tell you, I spoke with leaders in the Middle East in secret and in public meetings. I spoke with leaders in Europe. I also spoke with leaders in the US, with US presidents. They did not internalize the danger. Today, there is no one who does not understand the magnitude of the threat. There are those who tell me in private conversations, Prime Minister, we understand. We are afraid to say it, but we understand. And there are those who say we understand, and thank God they are also acting. 3, before the operations, we fought Iran alone. Today we fight shoulder to shoulder with the United States in an unprecedented historic cooperation between President Trump and myself, and between the US military and the Israel Defense Forces. Not only have we strengthened the alliance with the US, but we are also creating new alliances with important countries in the region against the shared Iranian threat. I hope that soon, citizens of Israel, we will be able to tell you more about these vital alliances. 4, we undermined the foundations of the terrorist regime, which before the operations appeared all-powerful. Today, following Rising Lion and the protests in Iran that followed, and following the crushing blows we have dealt Iran in Roaring Lion, we have shaken this regime, and I tell you, sooner or later, it is destined to fall. 5, we dealt a severe blow to and removed from over our heads 2 existential threats. Before the 2 operations, Iran was racing forward to develop nuclear weapons and tens of thousands of ballistic missiles. In Rising Lion, we pushed away the immediate threat of Iran arming itself with nuclear weapons and numerous ballistic missiles. And in Roaring Lion, we achieved a complementary success by crushing the regime's industrial capacity to produce these instruments of destruction. I want you to understand, Khamenei intended to take the industrial capacity for nuclear and missile production and hide it deep, deep underground. When I realized this, I brought it before the cabinet and said, we must act, because otherwise we will not be able to reach these instruments of destruction and the means that produce them. We had to act, and we acted. 6, we broke the power of Iran's terrorist armies that surrounded us in a noose. It is true, they still have residual capability to threaten us, but they can no longer threaten our existence or launch the tens of thousands of ballistic missiles and rockets that were intended to destroy Israel's cities. I remember before we set out on the War of Redemption, they spoke of 150,000 rockets and missiles and thousands of Hamas missiles. All of these were supposed to turn Israel's cities, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, Beersheba, into heaps of ruins. That will no longer happen. 7, we established security zones deep beyond our borders in Gaza, in more than half the Strip's territory, in Syria, from the Hermon Ridge to the Yarmouk, and in Lebanon, in an extensive buffer zone that thwarts the threat of invasion and pushes back the threat of anti-tank missile fire on our communities. 8, we changed our security concept. We are the ones who attack and initiate, and we are the ones who surprise our enemies. 9, We proved that our air defense system is the best in the world. I want to tell you, so many countries turn to us and ask for our help because they know we are number one in defense and also number one in offense. 10, we showed the wonderful resilience of the people of Israel and the Israeli economy, which even in time of war is breaking records. Citizens of Israel, we achieved these brilliant accomplishments thanks to you, thanks to our faith and our strength, which are the guarantee of our existence. Enemies come and go, but our ability and determination to stand against them, and when necessary, to strike them thoroughly, these are the things that ensure our future. Together, we have turned Israel into a regional power, and in certain fields, even a global power. We've achieved this thanks to our brave commanders and fighters in the regular and reserve forces, thanks to the fallen heroes of Israel, thanks to your steadfastness, citizens of Israel, and thanks to the courageous decisions we made in the government of Israel. While there were those who showed weakness and surrender, we continued with full force and struck our enemies with determination and without fear. While there were those who mocked the relationships we built, including with the U.S., we stuck to the mission and changed the face of the Middle East. We created conditions for expanding alliances and the circle of peace around us. Many times during the last 2.5 years, I stood before fateful decisions: Rafah, Philadelphia, the pagers, Nasrallah, the entry into Gaza City, the insistence on returning all our hostages down to the last one and not doing more partial deals, the entry into Syria to save our Druze brothers, and of course, the bold decisions on Rising Lion and Roaring Lion. In all these decisions, I listened to you, citizens of Israel. I listened to you, the fighters. I met you in the field. You told me, we understand well what is at stake. We're strong, Mr. Prime Minister. Do not surrender to the voices of weakness and gloom. Continue to fight. Continue to lead us from victory to victory. And that is exactly what we're doing. Connect to the spirit of the people, to the spirit of heroism, to the spirit of victory of our mighty fighters. From the infantry soldier charging forward in Gaza and Lebanon to the pilot crossing the skies of Tehran, the Israeli fighter is bold as a leopard, light as an eagle, and brave as a lion. We will continue to crush the terrorist regime. We will fortify the security zones around us, and we will achieve our goals. In the Passover Haggadah, it is said, and it is this that has stood for our forefathers and for us, for not only one has risen against us to destroy us, but the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hand. The heritage of Israel and our right to our land is what stood for our ancestors, and it is what stands for us. The nation stands firm, and we must all continue to stand firm. And thus, with God's help, we will ensure the eternity of Israel, a happy festival of freedom to the entire house of Israel. All right, before we go on, I just want to draw your attention once again to the Israel 365 News YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe there to get all the rest of my content, a lot of very important content up there. And I'll specifically point you to the playlist section where there is a 6-part playlist, Israel, the Rise of a Regional Superpower, a 6-part short video series. It really gives you an overview of everything that has happened in the Middle East and how Israel's role in the Middle East has changed so dramatically since October 7th. All right, let's get into the speech. Now that you've heard the full thing, let me tell you why I did this, why I think it was such an extraordinary moment. And for those of you still watching, thank you for still sticking around. What Prime Minister Netanyahu did here was very subtle but very powerful. He defined victory in this speech. Even though the war is still going on. It doesn't mean the war is over, but he defined victory for the last 2.5 years. Can't believe it's been so long, since October 7th, 2023. There's been so many questions revolving around one larger question. What is winning? What does winning really look like, right? Is it, like, what's the goal? Is it the destruction of Hamas? Is it the fall of the Iranian regime? Is it total quiet across every front, no more enemies at all? Like, what's the end? How do you define victory? And what Prime Minister Netanyahu did in this speech is he answered that question very clearly. Let me explain. First of all, victory is not regime change. We don't need regime change for victory in Iran. You need victory. Victory is the removal of the threat. I mean, he's, in a way, in this speech, he's reminding the Israeli people of what our national priorities are. We need to remove threats to us. And listen to how he builds it. He walks you through this 10 plagues framework, right? He's using it kind of like symbolism, but he's also mapping out what happened in the war. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Assad in Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. Now he throws in the terrorist groups in Judea and Samaria, which raises the question that they're really not dealt with. There's still a problem that is, it almost reminds the listener that there's some very serious unfinished business. If there's any real existential threat to Israel right now, it's probably that. But then he moves directly to the Iran issue, not just talking about the proxies, but also the nuclear program, the missile program, the industrial base, and the leadership. Those are the 10 plagues. And that line, the plague of the firstborn, referring to knocking out the senior leadership, is really a reminder of how thoroughly Israel wiped out all the governing echelons of the Iranian system. But then he pivots right after laying out this overwhelming picture of what has been achieved. He also reminds us that the campaign is not yet over. But then he talks about these 10 great accomplishments, and that's the key to understanding what he's doing in this speech, what he's doing politically. Because he's telling the public that even if this ends without a dramatic final scene, even if the regime in Tehran doesn't fall as part of this campaign, the outcome has already been decided. Look at the way he phrased it there in section 4 of this of the speech, right? Not of the speech, where he listed the 10 things, and the fourth one, let's go to it here. 4, we undermined the foundations of the terrorist regime. Notice he didn't say we toppled the regime, which before the operations appeared all powerful. Today, following rising lying and the protests in Iran that followed, and following the crushing blows we have dealt Iran and Roaring Lion, we have shaken this regime, and I tell you, sooner or later, it is destined to fall. Notice he doesn't say we will bring it down or it is a goal of ours to topple it. He's framing the fall of the regime, again, not as a specific goal, but as an inevitability based on what we've done. Okay, that's why, again, sooner or later, it is destined to fall. Right? It's not the objective, it's the consequence of what we've set in motion. He's separating those two things. He's managing expectations, because you could talk to 5 different Israelis and ask them what they consider an acceptable end of the war. You're always going to have people who say, we didn't do enough, there's still some threats, there's still more enemies. We don't know at what point Trump is going to take an off-ramp and maybe leave some portion of the regime intact. And you're going to have people on the Israeli side saying, whoa, we're not finished yet. But what Netanyahu is saying in this speech, and this is why I wanted to make this video, really, this is the key point. Israel doesn't need to topple the regime for this war to be a victory. Israel needs to look out for Israel. Israel needs to make sure that Iran can no longer threaten its existence. And that's what the prime minister is saying here. He's saying that has already been achieved. We can keep going. We can keep degrading the threat even more, or whatever's left of it, whatever dangers are there, whatever enemies are there. The way to really secure it fully long-term is to bring down the regime for sure. But what he's saying here is that we've already won. Now let's take a step back from the strategy and look at what else is happening in this speech, because it wasn't just a military update. It was a he was laying out this transformation in Israel's posture. And that's what my series on Israel as a regional superpower is about. You should go watch it. You see, for decades, Israel's whole, and he even said that, he said one of the accomplishments he said there was that Israel changed its security doctrine, right? That's what he said. We changed the security doctrine. And I've talked about this before. If you followed my videos, you've heard me mention this, that Israel, he said that Israel used to be reactive. Israel would absorb attacks and rely on, is our enemy deterred? Is our enemy contained? Are they incentivized not to attack? That's no longer the security doctrine anymore. We don't think about whether they're deterred or contained. We think about whether they have capabilities. If they have capabilities, we go after them. That's what he meant by taking the initiative. Israel's doctrine, its security doctrine, has changed. And here, he also talks about how Israel initiates instead of just responding. It's a completely different security doctrine. And this is a major impact of this war. And I'm happy he laid it out so so cleanly and clearly. I've been talking about this for like a year at least, that's the big shift that's taken place. And hopefully it'll stay, it'll be a permanent change in Israel's security doctrine. But then he goes further. He says that in certain fields, Israel's become a global power. He talks about the air defenses. In the last 6 months alone, I've talked about it in some of my videos, the Germans have purchased something like $8 billion in Israeli air defenses. The Greeks have purchased about $4.5 billion. Other countries are lining up to purchase Israel's air defense technology. So we've seen that, and that gives Israel more reach and more coordination. It gives Israel new alliances. And he also talked about how there are new alliances that I can't yet talk about, right? He hints that there's more to come, which means that there are relationships. He says there are strategic relationships developing that he can't talk about yet, which means there's going to be some announcements. When the dust settles on this Iran war, there's going to be new alignments. If you connect all of this, right, to the broader shifts we've been watching, all the alignment of many Arab states with Israel and the U.S., the changing balance in the Eastern Mediterranean with the Greece-Cyprus-Israel relationship, the relationship with India, the relationship with African states, right? The growing recognition of Israel as a security anchor, the fact that Israel is selling natural gas to Jordan and Egypt, and they're a vital provider of resources for other regional countries. Israel's position has changed, and he lays it out in this speech. Again, I've been laying this out about Israel's changing position, and that's why I keep pumping that video series about Israel as a superpower, because this war really reorganized the region. And we've been fighting the war and worrying about the next headline and the next crisis and the next diplomatic issue having to do with the war, the next strategic issue having to do with the war. But we need to take stock, and that's what he does in this speech, of where we are right now. Like, whoa, look at the world and look how Israel's position has changed. And that's why it was such an important speech. It was really sort of pulling everything together. And that's why I said at the beginning, it was kind of a victory speech. Even if the war goes on longer, he's laying down the fact that this war has changed things no matter what happens next, even if it stops tomorrow. And the most powerful part of the speech wasn't even the strategy, it was the Jewish identity part. And that speaks directly to what's happened also since October 7th. October 7th was far more than a terrible terrorist attack and a military event. It was a real shock to the Israeli psyche, to the Jewish psyche worldwide. It raised important questions about vulnerability and security and the whole question of whether the Jewish state can defend the Jewish people and guarantee our survival. There was a lot of doubt sowed that day. And what this speech does is it answers that question. He talks about the fallen soldiers. He talks about the wounded. He talks about the unity of the people bound by common destiny. And this is huge because one of the things that's happened over the course of this war is the societal cohesion in Israel, because when you go through a war together and everyone has kids fighting and every community is affected and people are dying for each other and going through the same struggles together, there's a cohesion that grows. It actually builds that strength. You don't wish it on yourself, but something has happened here. And in this speech, he speaks openly about it. Something has shifted in Israeli society. It's been stripped down to fundamentals. Who are we? What are we fighting for? What binds us together? And that's why the Passover framing and referring back to the Exodus is so important here. Jews think about these things. Right? We're a people that has been perpetually under threat, but now there's a difference. We're not just passively being acted upon and being attacked. We are actors. That's the transformation, and that's what this speech captures. It's that the Jewish people is no longer at the mercy of history. The Jewish people, the state of Israel, is shaping history. So yes, this was very much a victory speech. Not because the war is over. When I say it's a victory speech, it doesn't mean the war is over, but because the strategic outcome of the war is already a victory. And those accomplishments that this war has accomplished, regardless of what happens next, regardless of how complete the picture is according to every single person's version of complete, his point is that the strategic outcomes, the accomplishments that are laid out here are secured, again, in his view. And the rest is basically endgame. So just to sum it up, when the war comes to a close, even if there is no dramatic collapse of the Iranian regime in real time as part of this war, what he's saying here is that we've already set it in motion that this regime will fall, and that from the perspective of danger to Israel, we have won. Because in the end, that's what the war is about. Victory is about vanquishing your enemy and making sure that you no longer have those existential threats. But it's about so much more: the new alliances, the new strength Israel has, and how weak our enemies are. If you think back to what it was before October 7th, that's what he's doing in this speech. So it really very much was a victory speech. It was also, I guess, it could also be seen as the beginning of the campaign for the next election. There will be elections this fall, and this might have been the opening salvo of the election campaign. But in the end, again, I think a very powerful, very important, and even, dare I say, historic speech from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Right, thanks for watching. I'll be back with more tomorrow.